In the name of Deputy Richard Boyd Barrett.
Minister, as you and everybody is aware, drivers are being absolutely crucified by enormous increases in car insurance premiums. Overall, 20% in the last year, expected to go up another 25% next year, and in some categories it's just off the Richter scale. I mean, one of the groups who really asked me to give a shout out for them is the taxi drivers. I'll give you some examples in a minute, but huge numbers of taxi drivers simply will not be able to continue doing their job. Young people, people with older cars, you can go through the list. What I'm asking, Minister, isn't it time to consider a public not-for-profit insurance for older cars? You can go through the list. What I'm asking, Minister, isn't it time to consider a public not-for-profit insurance state company rather than relying on a failed private insurance industry?
Minister.
Thank you. In Ireland, the provision of insurance through private companies has been the norm for a long time. This is an operational model which has, in general, been shown to work well and efficiently. It is acknowledged that over the last 18 months or so, there have been some difficulties with aspects of the system, particularly in relation to the availability and cost of motor insurance. However, a state-owned company would have to operate subject to the same prudential rules as a private company, and there is no basis to conclude that the same problems would not periodically arise with this model. In addition, there would be significant capital costs for the state. The Government has in the past examined the introduction of a scheme of state indemnification in the flood insurance sector. However, this approach was not considered financially viable because it was concluded that over time it would distort the market and could incentivise the insurance industry to discontinue the provision of insurance cover in medium and high-risk areas. This would make the cost of such a scheme prohibitive. Furthermore, potentially complex regulatory implications would need to be examined in detail in consultation with the Central Bank of Ireland and the Office of the Attorney-General. In relation to the current difficulties in the market for motor insurance, the Cost of Insurance Working Group, which I chair, is undertaking a review of the factors which are influencing the increased costs of motor insurance. The Working Group brings together all the relevant departments and offices involved with the process. Its objective is to identify immediate and longer-term measures which can address increasing costs, while bearing in mind the need to maintain a stable insurance sector. By the end of October, the Working Group will provide the Minister for Finance with an update report, which will set out the priority actions required, and from November to December, the Working Group will then develop an action plan to enable the relevant government departments and offices to commence the implementation of these priority actions. In this regard, I will be consulting regularly with government colleagues and also with your office.
Minister, I want to, if you like, shift the terms of the debate towards looking at a public not-for-profit state-led model. I think, frankly, governments are being led by the propaganda, self-serving propaganda of the private insurance industry. The notion that competition in the private insurance market would produce lower premiums has been proven nonsense. Absolute nonsense, right? It is exactly their competitive drive for market share and ultimately profit that has caused this problem, and they're now trying to recover lost profits because of the madness of that blind competition and the collapse of Setanta and the collapse of Quinn, all the massive waste on advertising, profit-taking generally. I put it to you, Minister, that we need to look at other models. One you could look at is in Manitoba, in Canada, which has some of the lowest driver premiums anywhere in the entire American continent, and was set up precisely because premiums went through the roof in the same way in the private sector. There was a parliamentary committee set up, there was representations made, and they set up a public insurance company, and it has worked. And I think we need to look at that, and it has ended up cheap.
Thank you. Minister, 1 minute.
To thank the Deputy, and I don't want to get ahead of the potential recommendations of the Working Group, but we are looking at the operations in other jurisdictions and different models that are happening there in Canada, New Zealand and Australia. We're also looking at new ideas like peer-to-peer insurance. So we're looking at everything. So I'm not going to prejudge the outcome of what we're doing. But setting up a state insurance company would take time. And we need to look at the current problems, as you point out in your question. And we need urgent action on that. And we're looking at short, medium and longer-term solutions. We haven't finished our work yet, but just to give you an idea of some of my thinking in relation to a state insurance company, or even a state insurance model with no private actors, it wouldn't lead to any reform of the market if we brought in a state insurance company. It might reward bad behaviour that's already there in the market. What you would see then is people, as they are already withdrawing out of riskier parts of the market, withdrawing further, leading to an increased cost for the state, so expediting that problem. And the state would face the same problems that are already there in relation to provisioning and concerns about uncertainty around the cost of claims. So those problems wouldn't go away with the state insurance company. And then we'd have to ask the question of who would pay the difference between the market price and the discounted rate being given by the government. Where would that money come from, that step in? Would it come from the taxpayer again? Because I don't think we could put any more of a burden on them. But not just to say, we are looking at the jurisdictions, and I am keeping an open mind as to what might come from our investigations into those areas from the relevant subgroup that's doing that work. Thank you.
Well, I see there's an assumption behind that, actually if you like, what the private insurance industry is doing with premiums is sort of justified, and they're putting a whole case forward in relation to that. I don't accept it at all. In fact, the number of fatal and non-fatal collisions in this country have fallen substantially. There are not more accidents. There's serious problems about transparency in terms of the finances of private insurance companies, but I put it to you, it is actually to do with bad investments by these companies and by a crazy competitive drive for market share. In other words, it's their fault and their pursuit of profit that has caused the problem, and the collapse of Quinn and Setanta and other things. And certainly legal costs has been an issue, but although I don't think it's the major factor. A lot of those things and others, needless advertising, all of these things, those costs could be eliminated with a public insurance company. And just very briefly, can I really ask the Minister to look particularly at the category of taxi drivers who are literally being run out of business and will not be able to continue unless we do something.
Minister, strictly 1 minute.
Thank you, Lascancola. Well, just to say on your final point, we are looking at the issue of taxi drivers. We're meeting with every interest group that we can, either in the plenary session where we met with the hauliers today, earlier this morning, and also representatives of the car rental company, or with taxi drivers who one of the subgroups are meeting with. I think it's later this week. I think it's tomorrow, but it might actually be. Yeah, I think it's tomorrow. I'm not going to be led by the industry. One of the big problems that we have at the moment is transparency from the industry as to exactly what's happening, be it in relation to the claims process, the cost of claims, how they're calculating premiums. So we're trying to get that information at the moment. What we're identifying through our plenary meetings and through our subgroups are some honest brokers who are there, who are willing to share with us their information in an objective way so we can actually get a proper sense of the picture ourselves. And we will use that information to then try and build consensus around what the actual problems are, and use that information to build consensus around what the solutions might be. Transparency will be at the core of it, getting the information out into the public domain, because I also have a fear that that lack of transparency is having problems when it comes to competition as well. And I've raised that with the Competition Commissioner myself.
Thank you, Minister.